Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Office of Student Financial Aid for our very first episode of Financial Aid Friday. We are excited to be joining you every Friday live during June and July to help you bring you financial aid information.
We are so happy that you've joined us, and we want this to be an interactive experience. We want to hear from you. We want your questions, we want your comments, and we have staff members standing by to take a look at any questions that you might want to put on the Facebook event page or on YouTube, as well as for folks that don't have a YouTube account and can't actually post there, directly to our email. And if you want to send us any questions that you might have during this first episode, we would love to have them, and we'll see how many we can answer throughout this event.
So we're going to go ahead and start with just introducing you to us. We're going to be your hosts for the next 2 months on these Financial Aid Friday webinars, web series. I'm Jessica Hickernell, and I'm joined today with my co-host.
My name is Simon Furland.
And Simon, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to get to UMaine and your journey to financial aid?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I was fortunate enough, I actually grew up right around here in the neighborhood right next to Orono, Maine, a small town called Old Town. My father taught history here for 34 years, so I've had the chance to watch this campus evolve throughout my entire life. And something that the memories that I have, what's really stuck out for me is the sense of community, the sense of belonging, just a welcoming atmosphere. And that includes my interactions with the various offices on campus. I came in as an undergrad interested in theater and mathematics. And whether it was watching a football game, going to see a hockey game, or actually seeing and performing in live theatrical shows, really the groups, the people, the community on campus is what stands out for me. How about you, Jessica? What was your experience like coming here to UMaine?
Yeah, so my journey actually started back in 2006. I actually grew up in upstate New York, in a little town called Rome, New York. Shout out to anybody watching in Rome, New York today. So I came here fresh out of high school, and one of the stories I always like to tell is the first time I visited UMaine and just knew that UMaine was the place for me. I had applied to the University of Maine along with a bunch of other schools in New York and in the New England region, and I applied to Maine kind of on just like a whim, and I wasn't really convinced I wanted to go there. But my parents had convinced me that, hey, we should check it out. We took a road trip up to Orono, Maine, and Simon, let me tell you, this is the moment, I can remember so vividly the moment that I just knew in my heart and in my soul that UMaine was the place for me. I can remember we were driving in the entrance of campus, and it's for those of you who've been in the Orono area, it's over near where the new gas station is and the Bangor Savings Bank is. But there's a winding road to get onto campus, and it's lined with these tall pine trees. And I just remember driving through, and then all of a sudden we emerged onto campus. You could start seeing campus's buildings, and the sun started shining, and birds started chirping, and it was just like this magical moment. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a contender. And then I started meeting the people on campus. I met the folks in my program that I wanted to go into. And Simon, I'm going to echo what you said, that sense of community and the people that I met, not only in my undergraduate career, but they are the reason why I decided to stay and create my career in the financial aid office.
That's right. That's a wonderful story. And to be honest, some of you listening in may have already seen what Jess and I are talking about with some of the offices that you've interacted with. Hopefully you've had a chance to speak with some of the staff members here in the Office of Financial Aid. And I think that might lead us into our first topic for this evening, which entails the the different offices that you might interact with as an incoming student, and what each office really does. So I'll start things off with the Office of Financial Aid. We administer all different types of aid, from scholarships to grants to federal work-study, loans, waivers, assistantships, you name it. We're your one-stop shop for all things aid related. We also provide financial aid advising, which is more than just looking at the actual financial aid award. We want to provide a really holistic, full picture of what you might need to make and achieve your goals here on campus. And then in addition to that, we help to coordinate with other offices on campus throughout all aspects of student life. So we really try to help students in any way that we can to get started and to continue their journey.
And Simon, speaking of the different offices that we coordinate with quite frequently, the Bursar's office is one of those offices. Simon, I don't know if you know this, a lot of people don't really know what the word Bursars means. So a lot of the conversations we have, especially with incoming students, is, oh, well, I don't really know what the Bursar's office is. What does that mean?
Okay.
Fun fact, Simon, in ancient times, the word Bursar actually meant money purse. Which,
okay. I did not know that. That is a nice factoid. Thank you.
So conveniently, that's so funny, and it's convenient and it makes sense because the Bursar's office is our billing office on campus. They're the ones who take out-of-pocket payments. They're really anything to do with a student account, your charges, tuition and fee charges, on-campus room and board charges, setting up direct deposit for any refunds that you may receive. They also help to administer the financial side of our student health insurance plan, coordinating the opt-in or opt-out process for that, and also help students set up payment plans as a financing option.
Another office that we get several questions about would be student employment, and just job seeking and job opportunities here on campus is something that we discuss with students, and the Office of Student Employment, who we work with very frequently. They are there to help students locate jobs both on and off campus, and not just work-study positions, though they certainly do assist with that, but also non-federal work-study positions as well. They have a wide variety of resources, including CareerLink, which is actually the system that students can use to access and search for available job listings. Generally, that's available for students to start taking a look right around mid-summer. So certainly, if you are in any way interested in working on or off campus and would like some assistance with the job search process and anything student employment related, they are a wonderful team, a wonderful group of people, and they are there to help with exactly that function.
So Simon, I would say that that's a pretty good overview of the three major offices that we really are major players in the Money Matters piece of being a student at the University of Maine, and really financing and education at the University of Maine. So I think the next thing that'll be good to talk about is really interacting with these three offices. Are there any sort of requirements that students or families need to submit to these offices in order for us to be able to discuss account information?
Yes, and that is a wonderful question, because quite frankly, that's something that it's so important to do ahead of time. Incoming students were allowed to discuss the financial aid process and the specifics of a student account with parents up until August 15th. But after that point, once students are officially active students here on campus, FERPA guidelines, which are the regulations that protect student privacy and student specific information, they dictate that we need a student's consent to release information. In other words, a student's permission to discuss these details with the family members that they choose. So there is a form, it's labeled student consent to release information. It is available on the student records website, but certainly you can contact our office and request that form as well. And it's a very simple document. Once filled out, once completed, then we are able to, and the other offices here on campus are able to discuss the specifics with parents and family members.
And one of the awesome things that I know the Office of Student Records have just done with that form, that student consent to release information form, is they have made a fillable PDF that is able to get an electronic signature. So to make it easier for families who may not have access to a printer at this time, you can sign it electronically and then email it right to the Student Records office.
So Jess, what are some things that students should be thinking about right now as they approach the start of the next academic year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at this point in what I call the financial aid cycle, there's a couple things that hopefully by now students have checked off their list. Hopefully by this time, students have applied for admission to the University of Maine. So have submitted, either their Common App or the University of Maine admissions application to our Office of Admissions. Hopefully by this time, a student has submitted their financial aid application, which is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. We do have a priority filing deadline of March 1st for our FAFSA, but that doesn't mean if you haven't filed your FAFSA yet, you still aren't able to do it. You can still submit that FAFSA. So if you haven't done that yet, that's definitely should be on your list. In addition, if you have submitted your FAFSA and there was additional information we needed, what we call verification documents, which you would have found out through your Main Street student portal, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on, then hopefully you've gotten those documents to us as well.
And once those steps are completed, whether or not you were selected for verification, if you completed that step, if you were, then at that point you'd be eligible to receive your financial aid award. We do send those communications out as a physical letter, in fact, an entire financial aid award package, and hopefully some of you know what I'm talking about. That will provide you with all of the details related to your particular financial aid award, as well as some of the estimated charges that you can expect, assuming certain things like full-time enrollment status. Once you receive that, you can then confirm that particular award. There are places through your Main Street account where you can accept or decline some of those award items. You would also want at this stage, or once that particular item is done anyway, to confirm your enrollment. You can reach out to your department if you have an advisor assigned to you, or there's also the advising center here on campus that many of their staff members deal with incoming students, and they have some wonderful resources. They really are a blessing with just getting students started and helping students to navigate the actual course enrollment and the course options for their particular program. Once that is done, some of these other items are just things that maybe we want you to start thinking about. Reporting outside scholarships, outside aid. Some students might apply for external scholarships or receive some through their high school or other organizations in their local area. We would like to know about that so that we can place it and process it on your account, and that way your bill properly reflects that outside aid. And then another item related to scholarships in particular would be to inquire about a scholarship release form, which would be through our office, and enables us to provide certain information to different scholarship donors and just open up scholarship opportunities.
Great. So Simon, before we move into taking questions from folks, I think I do just want to touch on the importance of the Main Street Student Portal in terms of communications. I think as a new student, there's lots of setup of different systems, specifically your email address, your at maine.edu email address. In addition, we have an online student portal, which is called Main Street. And that's going to be really important if you have not yet logged in to your Main Street account. Make sure you get into that as soon as possible. Our office, as well as the Bursar's office and other offices on campus as well, they use that Main Street Student Portal as a communication tool. So if there's additional information those offices need, if there's important notifications about your student account, that is going to be that central location where you're going to want to be monitoring frequently for that information.
That's a very good point. There's a lot of information in that student portal, and it's certainly important that students gain access to it and sort of get used to navigating around that and taking a look at the information that's available there, because there's a lot there that can help answer some of the questions that you might have. In addition, it might be important to, and we'll certainly provide this information at the end of this particular episode as well, but how do you contact us? Right, so if you want to reach out to our particular office, you can do so over the phone. Our number is 207-581-1324. In addition to that, there are multiple ways to contact us over our website. So you can visit umaine.edu/stuaid. That's STUAID. On our website, we do have options for requesting Zoom advising sessions, for example. So there's a form that you can fill out in order to request to schedule an advising session with one of our staff members, and we'd be more than happy to help answer questions that way as well.
Great. And like Simon said, we will provide some more of that information at the end so that you can jot that down. So Simon, I think we're ready to move into some questions from our viewers. We've got a question here. If my financial aid is not enough to pay for everything, how do we make up the difference?
That's an excellent question. That's something that a lot of students and their parents and families are certainly curious about and want to know what options are available to folks to cover that gap between the financial aid and the actual cost to attend. There are several options that we want students and families to consider. Some of them we've mentioned already, which would be external scholarships. That's something that personally I wish I had taken advantage of more as an undergraduate, which would be looking for different scholarship opportunities online or locally through your local organizations, through your high school, speaking with a guidance counselor about the scholarship opportunities. But there certainly are databases out there with both local, regional, state, and national scholarship options. Some of them require students to fill out applications or write an essay or have different components to them. But really all of them are worth attempting. If you meet the criteria for a particular scholarship, it's certainly worth filling out that application. In addition to that, there are additional loan options that can be reviewed to see if a particular student or family member is eligible. There are generally two different types of loans that we deal with quite frequently anyway. The most common, I should say, are student alternative loans, which are in the student's name, which we can provide a resource online. It's elmselect.com, elm like the tree, and you can take a look at some of the different lenders that we've dealt with in the past. So that can help. Additionally, Parent Plus loans are loans that are federal and are taken out in the parent's name in order to help supplement that student's aid and help to fill that gap. And then lastly, as previously touched on, students should consider, if you feel like student employment might be an option that you might consider, I think that's certainly a way to go as well.
And Simon, I think it's also worth mentioning our installment payment plan options that the Bursar's office offers.
Yes.
As an additional resource to help students with paying any remaining balance after the financial aid is applied to the charges.
That's a very good point. Very good point. We do have a second question here. Will I get a letter in the mail with my financial aid award?
Yes, so that's a great question. So once you have submitted your financial aid application, so that FAFSA, and you've submitted any other required information that we may be asking for, then we are actually able to figure out what your financial aid eligibility is based on that information. Once we do that, you're going to be able to see that award in two different places. The first is going to be you will receive an actual paper letter in the mail. It'll list out all of your the different types of financial aid that you've been offered and the amounts. In addition, it'll also estimate some of your expenses for you. So based on your residency, whether you're an in-state or an out-of-state student, whether you're living on campus or with parents, it'll help to estimate some of those expenses for you, so you can get a rough idea as to what you're going to be looking at for remaining expenses after your financial aid is applied. So you receive a big old folder in the mail. It'll have lots of supporting information to help you read that financial aid letter. In addition, you'll also be able to view that financial aid information on your Main Street Student Portal. So I do just want to make one note about that. So you'll receive that first paper letter financial aid award your first year. Once you continue with us as a student for your second, third, and fourth year, you'll actually be able to view your financial aid on your Main Street account. And that'll be the primary place for you to receive those notifications about your financial aid.
And before we move on to the third question, I'd just like to point out, for those of you who have received that financial aid packet and have seen the handiwork that went into making that, Jessica here was extremely influential in the development of that package, and I would just like to say you did a fantastic job, Jess.
And I thank you, Simon, for bringing that up. I would also like to mention that the staff here in the financial aid office, we hand stuff those folders. So all the different materials you see in there, nicely laid out per my instructions. Those are, they're hand put together. So we definitely like to take the time to, make sure that, our first year students are getting the information that they need. To make those important financial aid decisions. So, I think we have another question here from our viewers. Simon, can you tell us what is the deadline for FAFSA?
Absolutely. So the priority filing deadline for FAFSA is March 1st. So it would have been March 1st of 2020 for this upcoming academic year. But as Jess mentioned, that does not mean, just because we're beyond that date, that there's no point to filing a FAFSA. We absolutely still would recommend that you file a FAFSA if you haven't done so yet, because there are still several types of financial aid that a student might be eligible for, even beyond that particular deadline. So there's still time, and if you haven't filled out your FAFSA or you haven't completed it, we would absolutely encourage you to do so. And if you're having any, if you have any questions about filling out the FAFSA or navigating the FAFSA itself, our staff members are here to help you with that. We'd love to help answer any questions and walk you through that process. So there is absolutely still time, and please fill that out. Oh, and one note here: the deadline for transfer students would be June 1st. So that's slightly different depending on what sort of student, how you're coming into UMaine.
Great.
All right, another question here: what should I do if my financial circumstances change mid-year?
Yeah, so that's definitely a really common question that we get. So what I usually like to start with is, we base a lot of the financial aid eligibility on that FAFSA information, so that financial aid application, and that FAFSA form is a very black and white form. It's asking for parent tax information if applicable, student tax information. And that information is then helped to create what we call an EFC, an expected family contribution. The other component with the FAFSA is that it's also based on 2 year prior. So, for example, for this upcoming academic year, for the 2020-2021 academic year, the FAFSA requested 2018 tax information. Mm-hmm. So certainly a lot can happen between 2018 and 2020 in terms of family circumstances. A lot of the common questions we get is, if there's a loss of income, a reduction of income, unforeseen medical expenses, things like that. So those are things that definitely, if that is the situation that you and your family are in, you should absolutely reach out directly to our office, the Office of Student Financial Aid. What we will want to do is one of our financial aid advisors will actually want to talk with you about the changes that you've experienced, when those changes occurred, because what we would want to do is compare that to the actual FAFSA information to see if we are able to recognize those changes in circumstance. Does that affect that EFC, that expected family contribution number, that then in turn could potentially affect your financial aid eligibility? So if your financial circumstances have changed in the middle of a year, please reach out to our office and have that conversation with one of our financial aid advisors. So looks like we have another question here. How does federal work study work?
Excellent. So that is also a question that we get rather frequently, because some of our students will see that as part of their financial aid package, and generally that's the question that we get, is sort of how does that work? Is it automatic? Does it work like other aid types like scholarships or grants? So federal work study is an award that is provided to certain students that meet particular eligibility criteria as part of the FAFSA. And it is an allotment that is available to students to sort of dip into should they choose to. So it does not automatically go towards the bill. It's not a scholarship, in that sense or anything like that. What it is that if a student, let's say, communicates with the Office of Student Employment and seeks a work study position, they can work a regular job here on campus, for example, a work study eligible position, and their paycheck is coming out of that allocation. So if a student had $2,000 in federal work study funds, then every paycheck that they receive, let's say biweekly, will be deducted from that amount as long as that fund is available. So that is something that students can quite frequently use to sort of pay for those additional expenses that are not directly linked, or at least that's what a lot of students will do, that are not directly linked to tuition and fee costs or room and board costs. Generally, these are ways that students can have supplemental income to pay for whatever they might need throughout the semester, as opposed to at the beginning of the semester with those initial charges. So it is not something that gets applied towards the bill automatically. It is something that students sort of opt into by deciding that they do want to utilize that particular fund as part of their aid throughout their semester or throughout the academic year. Wonderful question, and as mentioned, if you do have any questions about work study positions or seeking them out, or whether or not you're eligible for work study, certainly for that you can contact our office, but the Office of Student Employment would be a wonderful resource for you to inquire about available work study positions here on campus. Another question here, if I need to change something on my FAFSA, can I just log back in and change it on the FAFSA itself? Jess, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually another really frequent question that we receive, and it's actually kind of connected to the last question that I answered about if your circumstances change in the middle of the year. So once you have submitted the FAFSA, we recommend not going back in to make any adjustments. What can happen is, making multiple adjustments, especially, through the awarding process. It may, require us to ask for additional information. You may see multiple versions of your financial aid award. So what I usually always recommend to students is once you filed your FAFSA, then you don't have to go back out onto that government website. Just leave them alone. You can come contact our office. office, and we'll talk through those corrections that you wanted to make. You were thinking you needed to make on the FAFSA. Again, a lot of times it's because of these situations where the family circumstance has changed since the FAFSA was filed. So our financial aid advisors can walk you through, the different changes that we can recognize. And most times, we are able to do that without you having to actually log back into the FAFSA and resubmit an adjustment to the FAFSA. Good questions. Okay, so Simon, it looks like we have another question here.
Okay.
Do outside scholarships affect my financial aid award?
Excellent, excellent. So this is actually why it's important, or we certainly encourage students and family members that are aware of these sort of outside or external scholarships to log on to that Main Street portal and report that outside aid, because they do or can affect your financial aid eligibility, because they are considered part of your aid package. So if any outside scholarship that a student receives, whether it be, whether we're made aware of it ahead of time or during the academic year, that's fine. But it is considered aid, and it does sort of roll into the financial aid package and can affect certain items that are based on sort of a student's overall financial, award and financial picture. All right. Do I have to pay back my grants? Wonderful question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. So there's a couple different types of financial aid that you'll actually see on your award, that you could potentially see on your award. Scholarship, grants, and loans and work study. Those are the big areas of aid. In terms of scholarships, whenever you see the word scholarship or grants, that means that is free money. So that's money that you are not required to pay back. Usually, for scholarships, there's a merit component, so you've earned that based on grades or test scores. And with grants, a lot of time that's based on the information from the FAFSA. So scholarships and grants are types of aid that you do not have to pay back. And again, Simon explained how work study works. Those are actual funds that you're earning. And then loans, whenever you see the word loan, no matter what kind of loan it is, that does imply that there is a repayment required. So grants and scholarships, free money, don't have to pay it back. Work study, you're earning those funds. And loans, those ones you do have to pay back. Okay. So looks like we have another question here. I got an email about a change to my award. Why did it change? Simon, can you take that one?
Excellent. So there are a few different reasons that that changes to a financial aid award can occur, and certainly if any of these happen, then we will reach out and communicate with students and families about that particular change. So, for example, if we're notified about a change in a student's housing, sometimes students are listed as living on campus as a default, but in fact their parents live within 10 miles and they're going to be living with their parents. That can actually change your eligibility. So sometimes we'll get an updated housing information, or as I mentioned earlier, outside scholarship notifications can also impact your award. Changes in eligibility, those sorts of items can sort of change your financial aid landscape of what you are actually eligible as a student. So those types of changes, if they indeed impact your financial aid, then we do send out a communication. We want to make sure that we reach out to you and that you're made aware of not only the change itself, but also why that change is occurring.
Great.
All right. Let's see here. Are the percentage rates generally better for student alternative loans or Parent Plus loans?
Yeah, that's another really
Love
good question that we received.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the Parent Plus loans. So those are federal Parent Plus loans through the federal government, the Federal Department of Education, that are in the parent's name. Those are credit-based loans. And with the federal Parent Plus loans, those percentage rates, the interest rates, those are actually fixed each year. Currently, for the current interest rate for the federal Parent Plus loan is 7.08%. And again, that's a fixed rate, no matter what your credit is or whatnot. Now, with the student alternative loans, again, alternative loans, those are those private loans through either a lender or a bank. Those are loans in the student's name. They, again, are also credit-based loans, and since most students don't have any established credit yet, they do usually require a credit-worthy cosigner. Now, with these, since they're private loans being applied through whichever lender or bank that you choose, those rates are variable. So there is a chance that when you're applying for an alternative loan that you would see a lower interest rate than that Federal Parent Plus loan. So what my recommendation usually is to folks is to do your research. And loan research can be very tedious sometimes, but luckily we've got some really great resources. And Simon mentioned this briefly, but for alternative loans especially, it can get really confusing as comparing, different interest rates for lenders, different credit requirements, things like that. So we have an online tool. It's called Elm Select. Again, Elm like the tree, ELM, select.com. And you can actually go right on there. We've got a list of commonly used lenders. And there's just a lot of really great information to help you compare those different lenders. So you can really choose the best loan for you in your own situation. So I guess that's my advice. So potentially, there may be some alternative loans that have a lower interest rate than plus loans, but really your best bet is to do as much research as possible, collect all the information regarding the lenders you may be looking at for alternative loans, and kind of just sit down and write it out to figure out what your best option is going to be.
And just to piggyback off of that, if I may, to share a little bit from my own experience. So the researching of loans, while I agree, can sometimes be tedious, but looking at some of those terms and conditions can be very important. And Elm Select, you can sort of drill down into some of those conditions. And if you have the time for a little late night reading, you feel like it, I highly encourage you to take a look, because some of those loans offer different sort of conditions, different features, if you will, that others don't. So there are some loans that allow students to drop the cosigner after X number of successful consecutive payments. Others provide longer grace periods. So after a student graduates or goes below half-time status, or whatever the case may be, generally, there are 6 months as a grace period, for example, from federal direct loans. Some of those alternative loans offer extended grace periods that go beyond that, then can offer 9 months or 12 months of a grace period. So there are some features that are certainly desirable out of those loans. There are even some loans that, some alternative student loans, that are available for students in less than half-time enrollment status. Many of them require half-time. So if you are in that particular situation where you're going, ahead of time you're planning on being less than half-time, maybe taking one summer class, for example, and you want to inquire about a loan. There are some that exist that offer that. You just want to take the time to really look at some of those terms and conditions.
And Simon, I'm just going to piggyback off of your piggyback.
Please.
I will say that you don't have to be a loan expert or super knowledgeable to utilize that Elm Select tool. There are folks in our office who definitely love spreadsheets and love looking at the details. Cough, cough, Simon.
That is
and,
me. That is
really, really enjoy going through those details. But Elm Select really allows, simplifies that process. They use a lot of bullet points. So the information is very clear, and it's really easy to compare tools. But what I will sort of end this little the answer to this question on is, if you do need assistance, if you're feeling super overwhelmed and you're just feeling out of your element, looking at all the loan details and trying to figure out what's the best product. We can't tell you which loan to apply for, but we're here to certainly help you, walk you through the process, and help you with that comparison process so that you are choosing, doing some smart borrowing decisions. Okay, so Simon, actually, it looks like we have a follow-up question from one of your previous answers here. When you say scholarship could affect financial aid, are you talking about scholarships from the University of Maine or outside scholarships?
Excellent question, and thank you for posting that on YouTube. So any type of scholarship that a student is awarded can potentially alter, their overall their aid, what is allocated as sort of need-based aid, and therefore affect some of the other items. So it actually is both. So if a student is awarded, let's say, a departmental scholarship here on campus, that is taken into consideration as their available financial aid. And the same thing goes for external scholarships, so those outside scholarships. Basically, anything that is going to be used to help assist a student in meeting their financial aid need is taken into some of those calculations that happen behind the scenes and can, but not always, but can impact financial aid eligibility. Great question. All right, next question we have here. How long do you have to live in Maine to have in-state status? Jess?
Yeah. I just want to send a shout out to our YouTube viewers right now. Thanks for the great questions. This is another really great question as well. In terms of residency, so whether you're considered an in-state or out-of-state student, that's determined at the time that your admissions application is reviewed. If you are looking to try to move your residency status, and most commonly that's go from out-of-state to an in-state resident, generally, you have to be living in the state of Maine for a minimum of a year for non-educational purposes. Unfortunately, a lot of people get confused where, okay, so I'll just live in Maine and take classes at the same time. That would not qualify you for a change in residency status and qualify you for in-state residence rates. What I would say is if you think you have a special circumstance that qualifies you for in-state resident rate, so at this time, admissions is still the office you're going to want to communicate with in terms of potentially changing that residency. Once you're actually here in the fall, that's when you'll actually want to start contacting the Bursar's office for residency questions.
And something to mention for those of you that are out of state or non-residents, and I bring this up just as an option because there are some students and families that may not be aware. If you're from a New England state, there is a program that we abbreviate as NEBI. It's the New England Board of Higher Education. Now, certain states in New England have there are programs that students can take here that they can major in that provide reduced tuition or a reduced tuition rate, which is less than the out-of-state or the non-resident rate. Now, it depends on what state you actually are a resident of and what program in particular. There is information on nebhe.org. Again, that's nebhe.org. But those programs are generally ones that are not really found, or at least not common in that particular state, but it's a program that we offer. So you can certainly inquire about that. Now, I would never recommend a student change their major away from what their heart desires simply due to the financing. I would say, I'm bringing this up simply so that you know that it exists, but certainly something to look into.
Great. Okay, so Simon, looks like we have another loan question here. What is the difference between the subsidized and the unsubsidized loans?
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so both of these loans, generally when we hear subsidized or unsubsidized, we're generally discussing the federal direct loans. So after a student files their FAFSA and they receive their financial aid award, students are generally eligible for these federal direct loan programs. And depending on that EFC, that expected family contribution that is the result of the FAFSA, some of that sort of allocation, some of it might be subsidized loan and a portion might be unsubsidized. And the difference between those two items is all about interest. So the subsidized loan is not actively accruing any interest while the student is enrolled in school at least half time, or at least it's being subsidized, it's being paid for by the government, so that's why it's called a subsidized loan. Whereas the unsubsidized loan, while a student is enrolled, they don't need to make payments, but it is actively accruing interest. So that is effectively the difference between those two. So certainly if you're looking at, if you've been offered both of them, generally the subsidized would be the beneficial one, because of course you're not having to deal with any accrued interest while you're actively enrolled here on campus. Wonderful question.
Simon, and just a follow up to that, will students be able to, will they see on their award how much of the subsidized and unsubsidized loan that they've been offered?
Yes, absolutely. And certainly going back to the Main Street portal, the student portal, that's sort of why we want you to actively interact with that particular resource. Because when you go onto your student portal and into your student center, you can actually, there's a link that says View Financial Aid, and it will show you sort of a breakdown of some of those financial aid items that you've been awarded. Now, it'll be the same items that you would have received in the form of your financial aid award letter, but that's another place where you can find that information, and you'll be able to see how much you've been offered, if any, in federal subsidized loan, and how much you've been offered in federal unsubsidized loan. Now, again, the subsidized is not automatic. That portion is based on, that's the portion that's based on your EFC, your expected family contribution. So depending on your particular need or your eligibility, some students will have both as being offered, and some students will only have that unsubsidized loan as offered, and it really depends on your particular situation and what's been reported through your FAFSA. Okay, next question here. What do I have to do to get my student loans? That is important, Jess.
Yeah, and that is a really good question from our last one. So I'm just going to focus right on those direct unsubsidized and subsidized loans that we just discussed. As Simon mentioned, you can see those loans right on your financial aid award and on your Main Street Student Center. So again, loans are a type of financial aid that you have to repay. So the first step in order to get those loans is you actually have to log onto your Main Street account and accept those loans. So you are not required to accept those loans. And you're not required to accept the maximum amount that you were offered. But it is there as a resource if you need to. So first step is to accept the loans. And then for first-time borrowers, there are some additional requirements that you would need to complete in order to receive those funds once we actually start applying financial aid to student charges. The first is called a master promissory note or a loan agreement. And that's basically the contract between you and the Department of Education saying, yep, I acknowledge that this is a loan and I promise to pay it back once I'm required to. And then the other piece is called entrance counseling. And this is a requirement through the Department of Education. It's basically a little mini course that just talks about what a loan is, talks about interest, and starts to talk about the different repayment options that are available through federal loans. So both of these items, that master promissory note and that entrance counseling, can be done directly through the Department of Education's website at studentaid.gov. So again, once you go through that acceptance process, you'll actually get a little message on your Main Street account that says, hey, don't forget, you need to complete the master promissory note and entrance counseling. If we're talking about additional types of loans, how to get those, first for the alternative loans, those private loans, you actually have to apply directly through the lender to initiate that process. And so again, if hopefully you're using Elm Select as a tool to help you figure out which lender you want to go through, and you would actually contact that lender, complete an application through them, get approved, and then we get the notification of that loan, so we can apply that to your charges. And then it's a similar process for that Parent Plus loan, the federal Parent Plus loan. Again, where it's a federal loan, you're applying directly through the Department of Education for that, the parent is. And you would actually apply directly through studentaid.gov. And then again, we'll get notification of that loan so we can apply it to the charges. Okay, so our next question here. For sophomore year and beyond, do we only have to complete the FAFSA? Does the university automatically award financial aid from the FAFSA, or do we have to do something extra?
Excellent, excellent. So it sounds like there's sort of two different items from this question that I'd like to address. So first, the FAFSA is something that if you're interested in receiving your full financial aid award, all that you could potentially get through that item anyway, beyond not including external sources of aid, you would want to complete a FAFSA each year. And in fact, we have students that depending on their particular aid. I've seen students who didn't initially complete a FAFSA their sophomore year and then contacted our office, should I, shouldn't I? And we always recommend that you do, even if your financial situation has changed in either direction, because that is actually what allows us to fully package you, which means that you get the most out of what you might be eligible for, federally speaking. So, different federal grant programs, state grant programs, your federal direct loan options. The only items that are going to be sort of automatic would be any merit scholarship that you might have been awarded during the admissions process. So certainly you would have received, in addition to your acceptance letter, a letter indicating what you might have met for the criteria in terms of your merit scholarship. That item, where it's offered through the admissions process and it's directly from us, we will automatically post that to your account whether or not you have filed a FAFSA, as long as you still meet the eligibility criteria for that particular program. Merit scholarships generally have a GPA criteria element associated with them for continuing students, as well as sort of a lifetime limit in terms of number of semesters that a student is eligible to receive that particular scholarship, generally 4 years, eight semesters worth. So assuming that students meet that criteria, then we will automatically post that particular scholarship or scholarships to the student award. But anything else, that we do recommend for other aid anyway. We do recommend filling out that FAFSA every single year because, as Jess mentioned, right now for this upcoming academic year, we're looking at 2018's tax profile. And so the next year, if you're an incoming freshman, then when you're going into your sophomore year, then we're going to be looking at 2019 information. So that information is changing year over year, and we do want to encourage students to fill out that FAFSA each year. Wonderful question. All right, is the UMaine Early Action Award an annual award or just for the first year? Jess, do you want to discuss that particular program?
Yeah, absolutely. So that UMaine Early Action Award is awarded through the admissions office, and that is a one-time award. So that is not a renewable type of scholarship that students are going to see each year. So you'll see it your first year, and you would have seen it on your financial aid award package, but then your second year you will not see that. Okay, so Simon, I think we have come to the end of our question segment here, and we're just about ready to wrap up here the episode. We've made it through our first episode. Can you believe it?
And I just want to thank everyone who tuned in, and certainly those of you who have been submitting your questions. This is a series that we're certainly working hard to make successful, and we want to be here for you to help provide you the vital financial aid information that you might need as an incoming student or as a family member. We realize how difficult some of this can be when there's so many moving parts or different elements, different items to really think about. So we're here to make that process as smooth as possible for you. We want to help you with this. We want to answer your questions, and really we want to be here for you to advise in any way that we can.
Yeah, we're hoping that this live web series coming to you every Friday in June and July is really going to help to provide some of that more general information to help put those puzzle pieces together, so you can really just start to create your individual financing plan. So we've got some really great topics coming up here in the next 2 months, Simon. In addition, next week we're going to be talking about estimating expenses. We have an episode about additional financing options. And Simon, get ready for this. We have a couple episodes where we're going to have some very special guests.
Do we indeed? Who might we see?
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much information, but one of those guests is definitely going to be the director of financial aid. So I mean, our viewers are just going to have to tune in every week, and who knows who you're going to see here with us. So I guess with that, I think we can go ahead and give some of our contact information so that folks can jot that down. And Simon, do you want to do our contact information?
Yes, I believe we actually have it on our closing slide. But before we do close, I just want to mention any questions that we either didn't get to or that are posted after the fact. We will make every effort to include in our next episode or try to answer directly to that particular comment. So if we didn't actually get to your question, we certainly will make every attempt to do so. And again, thank you so very, very much.
Yeah. Okay. And so our contact information will be on the